Make sure I'm not all tangled up here. I first encountered God in an evangelical church in my early teens. Now, I know what you're thinking. This wasn't a moment with a bright beam of light and the heavens opening up to reveal a celestial Father over all creation with this flowing white beard. Rather, this was the first time that I was actually confronted with God in a scene unlike any that I had ever seen before. Now, I'm not sure how many of you have been to evangelical teen youth groups these days, but let me tell you, they are quite the sight to behold. After being invited to attend one of my friend's youth groups, I remember the dramatic scene unfolding as I walked through the doors, and I invite you to picture this with me. A large, dim room with rainbow-colored strobe lights flashing up the walls, a live teenage rock band up on stage playing songs and hymns with the large print lyrics up on the screen, and a whole sea of teenagers with their hands outstretched above their heads, singing and belting out this praise to the music. Now, this is a scene that might just surprise a few of us, just as it surprised me when I first found myself walking through the doors of this church hall. Growing up in a non-religious family, a family of self-avowed atheists, I didn't quite know what to make of this whole scene. Certainly, I felt a bit strange and uncomfortable being in that space, where so much was different from what I had understood about the world and my own place in it. I felt uncomfortable, too, with how I didn't believe in God, at least not like my peers did. How I couldn't seem to access that same power and passion that so many of them had as they worshiped and sang to the music. And yet, I did feel a power there, a power that I struggled to name with my own terms. God seemed a bit like a stretch for me, something that didn't align with what I knew of life and the world around me, a foreign being and character that I had no relation to in my own life, one that I found even a bit improbable and even a bit foolish. There was something moving in that space that I couldn't quite put a finger on, something that moved my heart to seek out spiritual community, a place of worship where I would feel more comfortable, a place where I could be my full self and not have to worry or wonder about what was wrong with me because I didn't seem to believe or have enough faith. A sense of power found in being with others, in this case, joining hearts with teens and feeling the companionship that gathering in community brings. And eventually, this would propel me into a spiritual quest and journey of searching as a precocious teen, where I would one day find my way through the doors of a Unitarian Universalist congregation, where I did find my people and a spiritual and religious tradition to call my own. So my sermon for you this morning is somewhat unusual and unconventional for most services here at UUCGT, as well as many services that you might even encounter at other Unitarian Universalist congregations. Here we are putting front and center the very idea of God and how we might understand God in different and other personal ways. Most Sundays, you'll seldom hear the word God mentioned, let alone having us explore what God means in our service. God may be something that many of you find challenging or even uncomfortable to hear or relate with. In our explorations this morning, I want to challenge us, and myself is included in this, to keep our minds open and hearts open as well to taking a fresh look at God. If you will, a fresh look at what a God of our own understanding might mean for each of us. Some of you might recognize this phrase, a God of my own understanding, a term that is widely used and shared in 12-step programs as well as programs like Alcoholics Anonymous. This is not to say that a belief in God is required to be UU. It isn't. We Unitarian Universalists celebrate that spiritual growth and this search for truth and meaning that we are all on allows both theists and non-theists among us to search together. The great beauty of our tradition is that we hold this multitude of beliefs about the ideas and concepts of God in our midst, the truths of life and other questions surrounding purpose, meaning, and destiny. We do not all see things the same way, and this is to be celebrated. However, I do think that there is something lost often when we relate with others, especially other people of faith, when words like God, faith, and prayer leave us feeling like we can't fully connect if we don't fully share these same understandings. In this Soul Matters month of renewing faith, we are being bold and courageous as a community to tackle some of these concepts and look at them with renewed depth and meaning. This Sunday's service is the first part of our exploration of God and sharing with you how I comprehend and understand a God of my own understanding. Later in this month in our service, you'll not only hear a service about prayer and faith and what that means for us as Unitarian Universalists, you'll also hear individual reflections on March 27th here at UUCGT from other members talking about a God of their own understanding and what this means to them. How differently we Unitarian Universalists relate to and access this concept of God, even if we ourselves are actually non-theists. Our reading that Mary shared earlier gives you a taste of what you might expect. 3 different takes and reflections on what God means to 3 separate Unitarian Universalist ministers. In one sense, God is found in the material world itself, the miracle of life coming out of darkness and natural process, how even this can evoke a sense of great abiding love that casts no person out. And in another sense, God is less about belief and more about what one does and how one serves. How God is a powerful reminder that each of us has such great potential, and how we are all connected to something way larger than just our own individual selves. God is also an experience on a wide spectrum, in some cases outside of a universe of strict natural and scientific laws, and in others, a real and felt presence in times of need, a personal relationship with the divine that bears witness and companions us through whatever life brings. The Unitarian Universalist musician Peter Mayer, a humanist, paints a glorious image of what God could mean for us, even to someone who doesn't hold traditional ideas about God. In his song, My Soul, we hear these beautiful lyrics. There are 100 billion snowflakes swirling in the cosmic storm, and each one is a galaxy of 1 billion stars or more. Deep inside a snowflake, I am floating quietly, staring out my window at a universe of snow. But my soul is so much older than the evanescent me. It can describe the dawn of time like a childhood memory. It is a spark that was begotten of the darkness long ago. What my body has forgotten, I remember in my soul. What I find so compelling about these reflections is how they each reframe the entire conversation about God. Not once is God that old bearded man in the sky, floating above the earth, tracking our every move, controlling traffic or the outcomes of sports games. Though, let's be real here, there are few atheists in the midst of standstill traffic while you're running late, or in the final countdown of a close sports match. God is so much more than the small containers that we can provide, more than what traditional religion teaches us to believe and know about God. Beyond the supernatural powers, the masculine pronouns, and the exclusiveness of unyielding and unquestioning faith. This is a God that I have come to know in my own understanding, an understanding that was forged in the midst of real-life moments of ministry. One of the benefits of going to seminary is having the luxury of time to consider and explore all sorts of ideas and topics relating to theology, divinity, religion, and yes, doing something like thinking about God. Though I entered seminary thinking that I knew what I knew, there was a greater depth waiting for me just around the corner, especially as I embarked on my first set of ministry and chaplaincy experiences. Before too long, my eyes met with a person directly across from me, asking me what I knew about God. wondering if I might pray with them and ask God for healing and support. Needless to say, I froze at first with these requests. I found my inner voice saying, what if I don't believe in God? Can someone still pray even if they don't believe? What will this mean to the other person if they find out that we don't share the same faith or beliefs? Now, part of what you just have to do in ministry is get comfortable with moments like that, especially being a Unitarian Universalist minister. You are a minister to just about as many spiritualities and beliefs as the same people that you serve. Sure, God might not be a working concept for all of us, but for some and even for many, there is something that we might know and understand that we also could call God. In the end, I was never found out for being an unbeliever. It didn't matter if a person and I didn't see eye to eye on matters of faith or if we shared the same belief in God. What mattered most was that we could connect as a human being to another human being. Ultimately, I found myself using the word God quite comfortably in some of these spaces, in new ways that I never would have imagined. And even now, it is a lesson and understanding that I am grateful for, one that helps me to connect with others across great division, even when we actually don't believe the same way. And if you ask me, this is Unitarian Universalism in practice. Being able to journey with one another on this path of life, even as we hold diverse theologies and beliefs, as there are grains of sand in the universe, or swirling snowflakes out in a whole universe of snow. We as Unitarian Universalists believe that connection is possible across difference, including differences with how we know and understand God. You can be a theist Unitarian Universalist, you could be a non-theist Unitarian Universalist, or find yourself somewhere in between. You might appreciate a new word that I actually learned recently, coined by a UU minister, that was named ambitheism, to refer to conflicting emotions about believing or not believing in the existence of God, holding both of these simultaneously at the same time. Each of us is at our own unique place and intersection of how and where we relate to God or don't, and how we understand God, as well as how we understand God in relationship with others. To me, a God of my own understanding is connection. It is not a God that is bound by any single tradition or belief system. It is beyond the bounds of what my own words can even describe or grasp. God is the presence knowing that even in moments where I am at my lowest, where the floor feels like it's falling out from under me, that I am not alone. That there is something that connects me in an unbroken line to all human beings and this life. That no matter what, the inherent worth and dignity that I hold as a human being is reflected in the hearts and hands of those I love, who also love me without condition. This God is a God of liberation and justice that binds us up together even in moments of great tragedy and defeat. In some ways, I do have a God of my understanding, even if I myself cannot fathom a supernatural creation or a God that rules all over the world and allows horrible and awful things to happen to good and innocent people. In all of this, God is something that I have come to know differently. A God that is larger than our narrow categories of theist, non-theist, ambitheist, of believer and unbeliever. A God that exists beyond flashing lights in youth groups and rock bands up on stage and a sea of teenagers belting their hearts out. A God that is not limited to our narrow definitions of faith that limit God to being outside of our scientific understanding of this world. This is a God that even some of you or I might know or understand ourselves. In our Time for All Ages story this morning that Betsy shared, we hear about the teacher Sophia who finds a mysterious note on her desk that reads, "I will be around tomorrow. I wonder if I might stop by your house for tea tomorrow afternoon. Your friend, God." Now she thinks rightfully that this must be some sort of practical joke somebody's playing on her. She had her own share of doubts about whether God really would come to her house. But just to be safe, after getting ready for God, cleaning up her house and putting out fresh flowers, Sophia is joined by a group of children, women, and even the whole town, as well as the town's mayor. And after a long day of breaking bread and cookies together, sharing stories and music, Sophia arrives the next morning at school to find another note on her desk. And in the end, Sophia realizes that God was present in the precious connections and moments between her friends and neighbors. She could cast aside her doubt and simply find the truth in the joy that she shared with others, the truth that God really did come to her house in ways that she hadn't expected. So as I close this morning, I leave you with this final blessing. May you remember the connections that hold you close, the moments of real presence and care that bind you in community with others. The moments and experiences of this all-encompassing love that comfort you when the ground underneath you feels shaky. May you taste of this great mystery of life, finding the words and ways that help you to grasp and name it, even in moments when our words fail us. Theist, ambitheist, or nontheist, may you find renewed ways of understanding God that speak across disconnects, even if you doubt or you don't believe, even if such a thing as God seems as far-fetched as ever. And may a God of your own understanding, however you understand or know God, be yours this day and in all the days to come. May it be so, and amen.